welcome to Crime Bytes, the show where we talk about some truly bizarre and disturbing crime cases. My name is Liz, and today is True Crime Tuesday. So next week is Christmas Eve, and I thought it would be fun to do a couple of Christmas-themed episodes. Specifically, I was thinking Bad Santa. That used to be one of my favorite movies. I guess it's still up there. It's just so wrong and hilarious, and you gotta love Billy Bob Thornton. I mean, anyhow, his character was just delightful or something like that, but more because it was a concept, or was it really? It took me down a little rabbit hole where I found a few real-life Bad Santas, and today we're going to talk about one of them. But before we get into that, it's almost New Year's, and we've got 2 more weeks of coupon code CRIME20 active on my Etsy site. So grab a unique gift like a butterfly wing necklace or a Crime Bytes hoodie for yourself. I must say, they are extremely comfortable. I really love a good hoodie, and I was thrilled that that's what I picked out on the first try with these, actually. Yes. Anyhow, grab something for 20% off with coupon code CRIME20 at the Etsy link in my description. And with that, let's get on to today's story. So, they say everything's bigger in Texas, and that's always been my experience, and today's story is no exception to that at all whatsoever. We're visiting Cisco, Texas, which was a bustling railroad town west of Fort Worth, Texas. It was known at the time for coal mining. And that's right, we're going back almost a century for this week's story, and we're visiting Texas in the Roaring 20s, back to 1927 to be exact. Bank robberies were extremely common back then, with a frequency of about 4 times a day, which is really insane to think about. And Texas became known as the bank robbery capital of the U.S. In response to this, just a few months before, the Texas Bankers Association had announced a $5,000 reward for anyone who killed an armed robber, which was a lot of money back then. But there was not a reward for a robber who was captured alive, which in and of itself is just wild to think about. Gun sales would skyrocket after this bounty or reward offering was put out in an attempt to deter robberies. Anyhow, today's story takes us to downtown Cisco, Texas on December 23rd of 1927. There were quite a few people out and about doing their last-minute holiday shopping. The main road, or Avenue D, is bustling, and Miss Blasengame was out doing some last-minute shopping with her 6-year-old daughter, Frances. Frances wanted to go see so many things, and that was all right, but now Frances wanted to say hello to a Santa that was coming down the road. She would cross over to allow her daughter to say hi to him, as many parents seem to be doing, but this Santa seemed to be in a bit of a hurry. He paused to say a quick hi to a couple of children and then walked right into the First National Bank. Miss Blasengame would pause, but only for a second, because Frances would pull on her coat sleeve towards the bank, and she knew it was best to just follow the Santa so that she could say a quick hello and get on with their day. But when they went into the bank, 2 other girls ran up to the Santa to say a quick hello. 10-year-old Emma Mae Robertson and 12-year-old Laverne Comer. Miss Blasengame would hold her daughter back as if to say, "You're next. Let these 2 say hi first." But her daughter's eyes widened largely, and when she turned to see what was causing that look in her daughter, who was just so happy moments earlier to see Santa, she just stopped for a second, because following the Santa were 3 very rough-looking characters, and they all had pistols in their hands. As soon as she made eye contact with one of them, he yelled, "Hands up." Well, this is great, she thought, and her eyes darted quickly to the Santa and the door that she came in with little Frances, and that door was being blocked by one of the larger men. Santa, just moments before, had two little girls around him, now was reaching into the office drawer and grabbing out the pistol that was in there. Unbelievable, she thought, but she also knew that with this new law that just came out, things could get really ugly really fast, so she was going to have to think faster. Santa walks up to the teller, points the pistol at her, and demands that she opens the vault. Sensing enough of a distraction with this going on, she tightened her grip around her daughter and bolted to the bookkeeping office right that she could see there. And she heard one of the men scream, "Stop!" and he started running after her, but she ran faster, and luckily there was an alleyway door. She paused, pulled Francis, and just bolted out of it. She ran up the alley and down the road right to the police station, shouting the whole way that the bank was being robbed. Chief Bedford grabbed his riot gun and a few of his officers, and they headed down the road to the bank. Can you imagine? You get pulled into the bank by your kid who wants to say hi to Santa. And then Santa is this disgusting felon who is robbing the bank, and you almost get shot. Happy Tuesday. So let's go back and meet our bad Santa, 24-year-old Marshall Fields Ratliff. Marshall wasn't a rookie bank robber either, although he may as well have been after you hear everything that goes wrong. I almost want to say poor Marshall, but no, he went into a bank with a gun, knowing that he would probably cause a shootout. So poor Marshall had all the bad coming to him. And he's in for one heck of a ride. So Marshall Ratliff was actually sentenced to 18 years in prison with his brother Lee just a couple of years prior to this robbery for another robbery, but they were both released after serving 2 years when the governor at that time was apparently going crazy pardoning people in the prisons. So Marshall and Lee would be out planning more robberies because clearly that pardon was teaching them lessons, you know? That fall, Lee would be busted while committing another robbery, and he would get sent back to prison. Marshall was still planning on robbing this bank, though, so he enlisted 3 of his friends, one who was great at cracking safes. As the plans developed and Christmas got a little bit closer, Marshall convinced his landlady to loan him a Santa suit that she had made for her husband, promising her that he would have it back to her before Christmas. Everything seemed good to go, but just days before his friend, who was great at cracking safes, came down with the flu, so Marshall asked his brother-in-law, Lewis Davis, to come along with them. Lewis agreed, but somewhat reluctantly. He was the only one in this group now who didn't already have a criminal record, and he had 3 kids at home, which is what made him reluctant, but the chance of all that money seemed too great to say no to, and he would say that he would help out, but only if there wasn't going to be any shooting. Marshall was probably like, of course not, we won't shoot, we're just going to tell them we're going to shoot them, you know? So the day before, Marshall and Lewis get completely trashed on moonshine with their other 2 accomplices, Harry Helms and Robert Hill. The group would steal a blue Buick and make their way from Wichita Falls, where they were currently residing, to Cisco. They would let Marshall out of the Buick a few blocks from the bank and creep the Buick up the alley next to it and park there and wait for Marshall to make his way up the street and into the bank before trickling in behind him. So after Miss Blasengame and her daughter made their way out of the bank, the rest of the hostages were rounded up and stuck in the booking room. They had 8 people, including the 2 little girls that had run up to Marshall when he first came into the bank. While they were doing that, Marshall was stuffing his sack with the cash from the vault, $12,200 and $150,000 in bonds altogether, which would be quite a bit, millions even, I think, for the bonds today. But then they are completely surrounded both by armed officers and civilians, and they realize that they would be unable to make a clean getaway into the alley, so they decide to use the little girls as human shields. I wish I was kidding, but yeah, that's what they decided. And as they were getting ready to make their escape, Henry would fire a shot after he got kind of spooked by someone that he saw in the window. And from there, Robert would fire a few shots into the wall or ceiling to kind of try and defuse the situation and show everyone that they meant business, but it had exactly the opposite effect, because armed citizens would just start opening fire into the building. At this point, the robbers would just grab the little girls and make a run for the Buick, firing at the officers and civilians who were firing at them. 6 hostages would be wounded. Henry would shoot the chief of police 5 times while he was trying to block the alleyway. He would also shoot one of the chief's deputies, Deputy George Carmichael, and both men would succumb to their injuries. And then they would all pile back into the Buick. At that point, Robert had a gunshot wound in his arm, and Marshall had one in his leg. Lewis Davis, the father who came only if there was not going to be any shooting, was shot and lying unconscious on the floor of the Buick. They would toss nails out the window to slow anyone down pursuing them, but it wouldn't be much help, because shortly after they started their getaway, they would get a flat tire and they were low on gas. Marshall and Henry would hop out and hold up a Volkswagen Oldsmobile at gunpoint, ordering 14-year-old Woody Harris, his parents, and their grandparents out of the car. People had followed them, and while this was happening, the locals were just shooting at them. And once they got everything and everyone into this Oldsmobile, they realized that they didn't have the keys. Woody had pocketed them before fleeing to safety with his family. So they were scrambling now and attempted to make a last-ditch attempt back to the Buick, leaving Lewis behind in the Oldsmobile completely unconscious. And he would die that Christmas from his injuries, but none of the townspeople would receive that $5,000 reward because they had no idea who had actually shot him. Shortly after this, they ran out of gas, hopped a fence, and ran into the woods nearby, leaving Laverne and Emma behind in the Buick with the blood-soaked Santa suit. And I'm sure not intentionally, but they also left all of the cash and the bonds that they stole behind as well. They were returned to the bank after this, and it had over 200 bullet holes inside of them, which is insane. The pursuit was still on for the missing 3 men, and now the Texas Rangers were on it. Men on foot and horseback secured the area with dogs as well, and they would find clothing and some items, but no robbers. And on Christmas, the 3 robbers would hijack another car and its driver from his driveway. 22-year-old caller Wylie was spotted by his father as he was being hijacked, and his father pulled out his gun and fired it at the hijackers, but ended up hitting his son in the arm instead as the vehicle sped off. They hid out for the night with Wylie and were eating oranges, but would not give him any, and just kind of made him sit there and suffer. The next day, they let him and the car go, though, and then they tried to cross the Brazos River in South Bend. They were spotted at a roadblock and tried to take cover in an oil field, and Robert and Henry would get hit in the gunfire, but they would escape. Marshall, on the other hand, would get brought down with 6 gunshots, and when they detained him, he had 6 pistols, a double-barrel shotgun, 3 rounds of ammo, and a Bowie knife on him. Jeez. Then on December 30th, Henry and Robert were captured in the town of Graham. They had 7 pistols in their possession, and they were wounded and exhausted at that point and went into custody without a fight. Marshall was convicted of armed robbery and sentenced to 99 years behind bars. He was then given the death penalty for this involvement in the robbery, which resulted in the death of Chief Bedford, and he was also given a second life sentence for his involvement in the robbery, resulting in the death of Deputy Carmichael. Henry tried to plead insanity, but was prosecuted and sentenced to death for the killing of Chief Bedford and Deputy Carmichael. On December 6th of 1929, he was executed by electric chair at the age of 32. He was the son of a pastor, and apparently his family decided not to claim his body, so it got buried at Peckerwood Hill, which was the nickname for the prison cemetery. Robert pled guilty and begged the court for mercy, citing an unstable childhood home as his reason for participating. And it seemed to have made an impression because instead of death, he would receive 99 years behind bars as well. He would be released in 1940 after 3 failed escape attempts, and he would die in 1996 at the age of 90. Marshall would attempt to appeal his death sentence, and it would be denied twice. He would pretend to have his mental health deteriorate to where he couldn't even perform simple tasks after Henry was executed. And it actually seemed to work, and people started to let their guards down after a while. And after that happened, he would sneak out of his cell door, grab a pistol from the office desk drawer, and shoot and kill one officer, wound another officer before being knocked out by another officer's pistol and returned to his cell. The next evening, about 2,000 vigilantes would storm and drag him out of his jail cell, strip him naked, and bind him by his hands and feet. They would drag him down the road to the back of the Majestic Theater, which ironically was showing the production with the title The Noose. And they would have their own noose with them that they would string from a rope that they hung between 2 telephone poles 50 feet above the ground. The rope would break after they lynched him the first time, but they would have another, and that one would work, and they would leave him hanging for hours just to make sure that he died. Then they would lay his body out on display in the local furniture store until the coroner would come for it. His mother would ultimately take possession of the body and bury it. While it was being transported into his burial, they would have a Santa-led Christmas parade to promote a store's holiday sales. I can't even with some of the stuff in these stories, especially this one. But yeah, his casket and a Christmas parade to promote sales, all in one. Holly jolly. Anyhow, Marshall was said to have been the last mob lynching in Texas, and that is also a crime that is punishable by death in Texas, but in this case, no one was prosecuted. In total, 6 people, 3 robbers, and 3 officers would die, and there would be 11 people who were wounded during this incident. The Ranger Times would call it the most spectacular crime in the history of the Southwest, surpassing any in which Billy the Kid or the James Boys have ever figured. So yeah, I mean, it was pretty crazy, and then everything that went wrong, hang on, Scooty, it's just wild. What do you guys think about that? And while we're at it, let's give the dog some bacon. There was definitely some twists and turns and a lot of bad luck for our robbers who sure deserved it, but wow. So for our real facts with Scoot Dog, who's doing so good today, isn't he? Without even having bacon till now. All right, let's see. I guess going along with our bad robbers having bad luck, it's like play stupid games, win stupid prizes, or at least expect to. I like that one, right? How many of you can relate to it? Hopefully on a smaller scale. I know I sure can. Anyhow, for today's positive highlight, I wanted to highlight a bank that is giving back. I found Community Bank, and they have branches in their southern tier who are adopting and giving to charities, including Toys for Tots, the Salvation Army, Angel Tree, Head Start, local humane societies, and more. So to every business and organization that's giving back this holiday season, keep doing good and spreading the holiday cheer when and where you can. Seriously, thank you to people like these. We really do need more of you in this world. Okay, guys, I'll be back with arguably a more sinister Santa next week. If you would like another seasonal bank robbery story, you can click this link here. And until next week, please stay safe out there. Bye!